Welcome. In this project, we are going to create a simple typing test that measures the speed of your typing in Python using this graphical user interface. So just to show you an example of what we're going to make, you can see here that it has the time that we've taken and the words per minute, and then it generates, every time we click new sentence, it generates a random collection of words. And if we start typing, this one's quite violent for some reason. If I choose another one, the moment I start typing, it starts the timing. And you can see that as we go, it's calculating how long I'm taking in time and how many words per minute on average I'm going. And then once I finish the last letter there, it sort of solidifies and keeps my score constant until I click new sentence. For this project, we will be using a free online tool called Code Sculptor 3. This is not something you would create a professional app with, but it's a fantastic way of learning. It's a simple web-based Python coding environment that's ideal for creating basic graphical Python programs with a GUI interface. And what we mean by a GUI, a graphical user interface, is when we hit run, is we have a window and we have buttons we can click and we have a canvas that the program can draw to. So let's have a quick look at Code Sculptor 3 and how it works. So first of all, just so you know, if you hit save, it will actually change the URL at the top of the screen. You can't see it here, but you'll see on your computer. And what you need to do is once you've hit save the first time is you need to bookmark that page. So if you click on the star in the address bar, that will create a bookmark for you, and then you can go back to your project anytime you like. Every time you make a change and then you hit save again, it will actually keep the same address, except the last number will change from a 0 to a 1 to a 2 to a 3, and so it will actually keep all of your different versions in there of your program, so you can go back to previous versions if you like. If there's something that you don't know how to do in Code Sculptor 3, it is very well documented. If you click the docs here, it will open up, and if you go to graphics modules and canvas, those are most of the things you'll probably want: how to draw text, how to draw images, etc., etc. But definitely this graphics module section is the one that you want. Now, a graphical user interface is not something that's built into Python directly. So you'll see here in this little example program that is up on the screen when you go to Code Sculptor 3, you actually have to import Simple GUI. And if you go on to make other GUI programs later, you'll probably use a different library that will work a little bit differently. But this is a really nice, easy way to get started. Let's have a look at this example program here. If I click Run, it says welcome, and when I click on the click me button, it changes to good job. So I'm going to go through this step by step just to have a quick idea of roughly how GUI programs are set up, because it's a little bit different to a command line Python program. So first, you can see here we've imported Simple GUI, the library, then we've just created a variable and called it welcome. Now keep in mind that does not draw it onto the screen or anything like that. It's just stored in the machine under the name message. Now, what we have here are two functions. One of them is called click, and it doesn't have to be called click, but this function is basically what runs when you press this button here. And then the draw function is what runs 60 times a second when your monitor is ready to redraw or to refresh. Now, those don't automatically happen on clicks and draw. That's what this next section is, which is setting up the frame. So this is the frame. So frame, we've just called it frame. We could have called it my frame or window or something like that. It's up to you, but we've called it frame here equals simplegui.createFrame, so that'll create the new frame for us. The first parameter here is what it's called in the top left-hand section there. Then we have the width and the height in pixels. Now the next thing that's done in this program is they've added a button onto the frame. This is what it says on the button, as you can see here. and this is the function that will run when the button is pressed. So I said this didn't have to be called click, you could call it button press or something like that, as long as you put the same name in here. Then we have to tell Simple GUI which function we want to run 60 times a second, and we've told it that that's the draw function here. And then the final thing that's happened is we start the frame. So this behaves a little bit differently from a text-based command line Python program. Basically, all of this setup happens pretty much instantaneously, and then all the code that gets run after that point is in these functions that we call them callbacks. So the program actually calls back into our code when either a click happens or the screen is ready to draw. So you can imagine every time there's a click, this function will run. Every time the screen's ready to redraw, this function will run. And another word for this is event-driven programming. So it's basically the idea that these functions run when certain events happen within the program, whether it be a button click or user input or something like that, or the mouse moving or something like that. It's a little bit of a different way of thinking about things, but you will get used to it after a period of time. Okay, so we can probably use some of this boilerplate code, but not all of it. I'm going to get rid of the comments up here. Now we are going to have a message on the screen that we're going to be typing, so we can leave this variable here. I might get rid of this functionality, changing the message to good job. We'll get rid of that. And we are going to be drawing the message on the screen, so we can leave that for the moment. We'll probably be editing where it draws the message and how it draws the message, etc., but we can leave that. I think I'm going to change the name of the tab to typing test, but you can call yours whatever you like. And you'll see that that now appears up in the top left-hand corner there. Now we need to make this canvas size a little bit bigger. So I think I'm going to do 600 by 200, and that will give us more room to write our message, although we're probably going to change the text size to be smaller as well. But I think we will actually use all of the code here. We might change the name of the function later, etc., but this code we will definitely be useful to us as we go forwards. All right, so the first thing that I would really like to do would be to generate that sentence that gets displayed that you have to type every time. So instead of it always saying welcome, it will be a collection of maybe 4, 5, or 6 words that we can then copy and type. Now I'm going to be using a long list of roughly 1,000 of the most common words that I've found and edited a little bit. But you can, if you wish, you can use that word list, or you can create your own word list if you have a bit of time, or you can edit the word list that I'm using. So I will post a link in the description to the word list that I'm using. And what we're going to do is we're going to give it a name, create a variable to store the words in, and I'm going to call mine random word list. And it is going to be a list, so it'll be a list of words in this way. So a list in Python always has square brackets, and you can then put a list of words like hello and world like this, and this will be a list of words, and it will go off to the right like this. So I'm going to copy and paste across that word list of 1,000 words and replace this one. And just make sure that you do get that square bracket on the very final word. And then I'm going to scroll back across. So this is obviously a very long list, and hopefully when we choose random words we won't get too many double ups. So that's our word list. So how do we then make this message variable here? Instead of being welcome, how do we make it a combination, a random combination of some of these words? Well, if we're going to be doing something random, we will need to import the random library from Python. the random functionality, or all of the random functions, don't come bundled automatically in Python. You have to tell Python, oh, I need that special library to use. So there we go, we've got random imported. And as a first step, maybe we'll just make the message be one of those random, roughly 1,000 words. And the way you do that is you say from the random module, dot, which means I'm calling a function from within that module. So random dot choice. And the random choice function, we need to give it the name of the list that we want to choose a random word from. So we'll say random word list. And now, if we run it, it will say music. And if we run it again, it'll say model. Run it again, reason. So that's actually working quite well. Now, I might just change the positioning before we generate a long sentence. I might change the positioning. So here is where we draw the text message. Probably the main thing I would like to change would be the size of the text. So instead of 48, I've played around with some different sizes. And I think 25, it gives us the ability to have quite a long list of words here on the screen. I think I'll leave it in the same spot for the moment. But we might actually change the color from red to white. And that will make it a little bit easier to read as we go across. So the final part of getting our message together would be, instead of having one word, make it join, let's say, 5 words together. So to start off with, I'm going to say the message starts off being just an empty string. And then we're going to loop through 5 times. Now the way we loop through 5 times some code in Python is we can say for I in range 5. And what will happen is this will loop through the code 5 times. The first time, if we need it, we can see what number loop we're in. I will be equal to 0 the first time, 1 the second time, etc., etc., etc. Just to show you what this does, I'm going to just print the variable I here as every time we go through the loop. And you'll see it actually, each time I is goes up by 1. So we can tell, if we need to, we can tell which iteration of the loop we're going through. But right now we're not going through any, we don't need that information really. All we need to do is add a random word to the message. So I'm just going to say message plus equals, that means join onto. If you do with this with numbers, it will perform addition. If you do this with strings, these are strings, or text, you might like to think of it as text. If you do this with strings, it will just join them together. So message equals this plus a random word, and it'll join one on 5 times. Okay, let's run this. Okay, so that worked. However, the problem is that we don't have spaces in there. So we can say every time we'll add on a random word, but then we'll also add on a space. So that looks like it works. The one problem we will have later on if we do this is there's actually a space that you can't see on the final word, because after it's joined the final word on, it will also put this space on. So what I'm going to say is, if I is less than 4, because 4 is the last one in the loop, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I is less than 4, then we know there's another one coming, and then we're going to add this space, okay? And now we've created our, every time we've created our different string of words, or not string I should say, every time we've created our different selection of words. And we have some space off to the right here in case we get a particularly long set of words. Like administration, if there were a few more that were that length, we would need all of that space. Okay, so the next thing I would like to do would be make this button here generate a new sentence for us. So right now you can see when we start the program it creates a new set of words. Luckily we had that space there. This is quite a long one. But I would like every time we click the button, and I would like the button to be called new sentence. So let's come down here. This is where in the code we add the button to the window or to the frame. And you can see here we call it click me. But I would like to call it new sentence. And I would also like to call this function new sentence. Now, a function name or a variable name can't have spaces in it, so we'll put an underscore. And so what we need to do is we need to move all of this code into this function here. So I'll say Control X and Control V. Now we need to make sure that everything is indented correctly. So everything inside this function needs to be one tab space in. Everything inside this loop needs to be one tab space in. And then this if statement we have to be one tab space in. Now we're using a global variable called message. So we will still need that message variable to be created at the start of the program. But what are we going to set it to? If we want to just create a variable in Python and we don't want it set to anything specific, we can just use the word none with a capital N. And this is a little bit different to an empty string or a zero. It actually just means there's no information in here whatsoever. Having a zero is actually having information. Having an empty string is having information or data. This just means just create the variable. There's absolutely nothing in there. And then when we run this here, this function new sentence, when we click the button, then we will create an empty string and add all these words to it. Now, just a quick note about global. Global simply means, hey, instead of creating a new variable called message inside this function, I want to use the one that's global to the whole program that we already created earlier. So if you don't have this, the function will create a new variable called message inside it, which is not what we want. So let's try running that. Okay, so we have a bit of a problem because we've made a function to create a new sentence, and we create it on the button click, but we don't create a new sentence at the start of the program. So right down here at the bottom, before we have the code frame.start, I'm actually going to run the new sentence function to create a new sentence. And now there we go, and hopefully, fingers crossed, yep, every time we click new sentence, we get a new sentence. So how do we then have the ability to type the message under here? So what we're going to actually do is we're going to not have another variable storing what we type. We're simply going to have a variable called cursor, which records how far into the message we've typed. And we're only going to be able to type the correct letters. So for example, if you started here pressing the letter A, the cursor would stay at 0, it wouldn't move. But if we typed H, that's the correct letter, the cursor will move forwards and then it will get displayed the text underneath here. So how are we going to do that? Well, first of all, let's make a cursor variable, and we'll start the cursor at 0. In fact, we might do the same with the cursor in new sentence here. We'll want the cursor to go back to 0. So I'll say message equals that and cursor equals 0. So now we have a cursor that can keep track of how far we've typed. And we'll also need a way to detect what's being typed by the user. So that is called a key handler. So there are key down handlers and key up handlers. We care about when a key is just been pressed down. What do you do when any key has been pressed down? So I'm going to put in here frame.setKeyDown handler, and I need to give it the name of the function. Now we could call this anything we wanted, but it makes sense to call it key handler because that's what's happening. So let's make a function called key handler. So I'm going to say define or def key handler. And this function will get run whenever a key is pressed. And in here, I'm going to write the word key. And this is actually will be given to us. Whatever we type, we could have called this anything. We could have called it K or event or whatever. But whatever we put in here will be a variable inside this function that will give us a number of the key being pressed. So let me just show you, for example, if I say print key, and if I run this up here and I press G, you'll see the number 71 came up. And if I press space, the number 32 comes up. And so each key actually has a number. What we also need to know then is what number the letter that we're up to in our message is. So for example, what number is this E? So we can tell if we press E whether we've pressed the correct letter or not. That's what we really need to know, is what number is this E, and then what number has been pressed, and are they the same? So how we find out the number for where we're up to is, first of all, we need to find out what letter we're up to. So we have our cursor here. So what we're going to do is we'll say that the current letter, and again that's just a variable name I've made up, but current letter is, we need to find out the number of that E. So let's say our cursor's at 0, the 0th letter in the string is E. How do we work out what number that is to match up with what's being pressed? The way that we do that is we just go to the message string, and we need to find out the 0th, or the very first letter in the string. We would put square brackets and put a 0, but we want to know wherever our cursor is up to. The cursor might be at 5, so we're going to put cursor in there. Now, just to show you, I'll say print current letter, and the cursor starts at 0. So I'll go up here, so you can see there's an F here, and when I press any key now, it should show the first letter of our sentence there. Okay. So what we want to know is what number that is. So let's go and say, we can call this current letter number equals, and the way that we get the number for it is Simple GUI has a key map, and that will give us the number that we want. So we can put it in here. We'll say Simple GUI.keyMap current letter, and if I print current letter number now, then whatever the first letter is there, L, should be 76. Okay, so that's the number of that, and then we can match it up with the number that we just typed and see if it's the same. So what we can say is, if we go down here into the key handler, we can say if key, which is the key that we just typed up here, equals current letter number, then cursor plus equals 1. So what that means is that if we've hit the correct next letter, then we move on to the next letter in our typing test. And let's actually just test that's working by saying print success. Okay, so let's try that now. We'll run that, and we'll bring it down here, and if I press, oops, oh, okay, we forgot to, we're using the global cursor variable. Okay, so let's say I hit the L key, nothing happens, but if I hit N, it says success, and then if I hit A, it says success, and T, it says success. So you can see our cursor is actually moving along invisibly, and each time we hit the correct letter, it says success. Now, one problem that we have is NATION, so we're up to the space. If I hit space, one weird thing about Simple GUI is that space is not included in this key map for some reason. So I wouldn't worry too much about the logic of this, but just if you could put this one line of code up the top under random word list, we're just going to add space, which is 32, to the key map. So simplegui.keymap and then the space equals 32, and that will fix our problem. Okay, so now we have the key map working there. Now the next thing that we need to do is we need to actually go and print out on the screen, or draw out on the screen, how the text that we've already typed. So if I go into there, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go into the draw function and copy this, Control C, and we are actually going to draw, and we'll make this one be maybe in red. You can choose any other color that you like. And this one will be further down than the other one. So instead of add 112 pixels from the top on the y-axis, maybe we'll say 40 pixels down or so, so 152. And let's print that. Okay, so you can see here, this will be the one that we're typing, but we don't want to type all of it. We only want to type up to where the cursor is. Okay, so if the cursor is at 4, then we'll chop off here. So how do we do that? Okay, so let's actually calculate that every time we draw here. So let's make a new variable called typed. And in fact, let's just get our global cursor and message. Now we might not need to do this because you only need to do this if you're changing the variables usually, but just in case. So I'm going to make a new variable called typed, and let's set it to hello. And here we're not going to draw message again, we're going to draw what's been typed. So let's run that. Okay, but what we want is we want this to always be the amount that we've actually typed. So what we can do is we can say typed equals message, and then if we were to put a 0 in there, that would get the first letter only, etc. If you wanted to get the amount up until where the cursor is, there's this shortcut in Python where you can put a colon and then 5, for example, and it'll show the first 5 characters. Well, we're up to where the cursor, wherever the cursor is, so we'll put the cursor variable in there. And now, hopefully, however much we type, oh, and we run into an error, but we can fix that later. That's not a problem. We need to finish it when we run out longer than the actual length of the message. There are some problems, but we can fix that later. But for the moment, this is actually working perfectly. And you'll notice when we press the wrong keys, nothing happens. The cursor doesn't move. And when we press the correct keys, it types out what we've done so far. So what I would like to do next is add a timer that gets displayed up here, and it starts when we hit our first key, and the timer will then finish when we get to the end of the sentence, and hopefully we can actually fix that problem where there's an error when we keep typing after the end of the sentence. So first of all, let's make another variable called finished, and then when we make a new sentence, we will set, I'll add finished to the globals here, and finished will be false at the start here. So finished will be false. And what we can also do is in our key handler, we'll add finished to the variables that we can access. And what I actually don't want to run any of this code if we have finished. Okay, so if any of this is so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say if finished, Now that's shortcut for if finished equals true. We can just say if finished because it's already a true or a false. It's already a Boolean. If finished, return. So that will end the function and none of this stuff will run. And then the final thing that we're going to do is in our code down here, instead of just adding one to the cursor, we're going to check to see, is the cursor greater or equal to the length of the message? And if it is, then we've finished. So hopefully now, if we go down here, okay, it didn't crash because our key inputs are being ignored now because the finished variable is set to true. So now we should be able to add our timer quite easily, hopefully. So the way that we add a timer is on our frame down here, we say simple GUI equals create timer. Now the reason I'm also storing a reference to it in this variable called timer, and you could call this whatever you want, is that means we can control the timer later on. We don't just want to start a timer, we want to be able to control it as well. So if we store a reference to it in a variable like this, then we can do that. And I would like this timer to tick up every 1/10 of a second, so that's 100 milliseconds. And we're just going to make a function called timer handler. Now, the timer handler function, we are going to make another variable up here called seconds. And again, we will set this, I'll make a reference to the global variable here, but we will, for a new sentence, we will always set this to 0. And what we're going to do is we're going to, every 100 milliseconds, we're going to increase the timer so the seconds variable by 0.1. So it'll just go 0.1, 0.2, etc., etc., etc. Now we can also print this out on the screen quite easily. And I might just do this at the top here. Oops. Now I've just copied and pasted this because I want to save a little bit of time, but I'll explain what we've done here. So we've said canvas.drawText, and we've got the string time, and then we're adding to it the seconds here. Now I might break this up a little bit, and I might make a variable called print time actually. And so this is the time that's actually being printed on the screen. And what we want is, we want the seconds variable, but we want it rounded to 1 decimal place, just in case sometimes in programming you get these little errors where it says, 3.100001, and I want to get rid of those errors. So I'll say print time equals round. Well, let's take this out of here. Round seconds to 1 decimal place. So 3.10001 would change to 3.1. So round seconds to 1 decimal place. But then we want it to be a string so that we can join it with the word time here. So we're going to put str, which will change it from a float to a string. And then we'll say print the word time, the string time, plus the variable print time. And we're going to print it in this position and at this size font and in white. So you can see here, now it is appearing on the screen up here. Now, what we want is for that timer to be started when we press the first letter. So in the key handler here, if the timer is not running and we've pressed a key, then we want to start the timer. So we can say, if not, timer.isRunning. That's an input function that the timer has in Simple GUI. So if it's not running, then timer.start, like this. And hopefully now when we press a key, the timer has started here. And then the last thing to do with the timer would be if the cursor is the length of the message, we'll say finished is true. and we also want timer to stop. Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, and the timer stopped 4.7 seconds. And then when we click new sentence, the timer goes to 0 and we have a new sentence. Okay, so the final thing that I want is a words per minute calculation over here. And we're just going to go on the basis of 5 letters being a word. So we're not going to count the number of words here. We're going to count the number of letters and divide that by 5 to find out the number of words. All right, so let's get into it. So we can do all of these calculations inside the draw handler here. First of all, what we're going to do is make a little section where we do the WPM or words per minute calculations. And we're just going to have a variable called words. So this is the number of words that have been typed so far. And the words is simply going to be the cursor divided by 5. So let's say the cursor is at 0, 0 divided by 5, we've done 0 words. If the cursor is 10 divided by 5, then the words that we've done will be 2. And we can have decimal points on that as well. Okay, so that's the first step. Next step we need to do to get words per minute is we need to know the number of minutes. And we don't have that, we only have seconds. So we're going to take seconds. Now we're not changing the variable seconds, so we don't have to get the global seconds here. But to get the number of minutes is seconds divided by 60. Now, words per minute, just to basically, okay, the words per minute calculation equals words divided by minutes. That's pretty simple. And maybe we'll just print WPM each frame, but I think this is going to crash. And it says we're dividing by 0. And the problem is that at the start of the program, the minutes is 0. And you'll know in mathematics we can't divide by 0. So let's just set words per minute to 0. And then we'll say if seconds is greater than 0, or we'll say if minutes is greater than 0, then we actually run this calculation. Okay, and if I start typing, yes, you'll see that the words per minute are coming up here, but with all sorts of crazy decimals. So we probably want to round that before we draw it. I'm just going to copy and paste a bit of code here to save a bit of time. So when we draw the words per minute, we're going to want to, again, we're going to want to print the text WPM and then round words per minute. Actually, let's take this out. Let's make it a bit easier. Let's make a new variable called print words per minute. And this is going to be rounding words per minute just to 0 decimal places, like 47, for example. You could do it to 1 if you wanted, so you could do something like that. 1 decimal place, but I'm just going to do mine to a whole number. And then we turn it into a string, and then we print the text WPM, followed by what's in the variable. And I'm going to print it with these, this position, this text size, and this color. And now we have words per minute up here. And if I start typing, you can actually see it in real time calculating, which is a little bit distracting, but I like it. Okay, now you notice there that we still had the occasional problem with the 9.5 being a little bit inaccurate. I'm not entirely sure how to fix that in Python, unfortunately, but this might be the best that we can do. So you can see there, the moment that we finish, words per minute shows our final time and our final words per minute, and then when we click new sentence, everything goes back to Ah, there we go. Okay, so it looks like our typing test is working well. So if you wanted to change this a little bit, you could mess around with having the words per minute maybe to a different number of decimal places. You could change the positioning. Maybe instead of serif font, you want sans serif font. You can look in the docs how to do that. You could change the colors, the way it's set up. You could change the word list to something else, create your own word list, etc. So hopefully you have a little bit of fun with this. You could even make a themed typing test where all of the words in the word list are related to a particular sport or something like that. I will leave it up to you. So have fun, and I'll see you in a future project.